we should start. I think today's session is going to be a bit quicker, then maybe we'll be able to jump into random questions. Like I can see Nucleus talking about workers, so maybe it can help with explaining something about workers. And yeah, we'll just see how it goes. If you have any questions, want to interrupt me, write on YouTube chat. There is slight delay between us, like 5 to 10 seconds. So if you don't see me responding right away, it's because of this. And yeah, so just a quick summary of what we're going to do today, or what we did last time first. So since we're starting from the basics, so now we have SaaS Boilerplate installed on the machine, on local machine, and we wanted to implement something on backend, print something on frontend, and see results. What we managed to do after, of course, setting up or generating the project with the command is we created a GraphQL schema in a new Django app, and in this schema we added a new type and a new model also in Django, and type for this model in schema. Created a new field which lists number of workshop items, because I'm lazy with naming, but we listed those workshop items. Then we connected this from front-end side, so implemented a component, a new route which you're able to navigate to, and fetch those items from backend, from database, and display them on the front-end side. And we weren't focusing anything on any styles, CSS or anything. It was everything about logic, which usually is the most interesting part. And here we're going to do the very similar thing, at least continue what we did last time. As I promised, we wanted to continue with creating mutation on backend, saving some data into database, especially talking about those workshop items. So committing this mutation from frontend, which leads us to creating a form, and that should conclude our session, at least what I wanted to achieve on the last session, but we took too much time with the read part, so this one might be a bit shorter, and then we'll be able to go through questions that you guys have here on the live chat. So let's begin. I'll share with you my PyCharm screen. Let me know if you guys can see it, and whether it says high quality enough, or I should enter some presentation mode or something. Is it okay? No, always waiting 5 to 10 seconds to get the response. All good. Okay, cool. Thanks. So, best to start with backend, at least in my opinion. In this case, we already have a workshops app. Maybe I'll walk you through briefly of what we did before. It's a regular Django app, just put it in the apps directory. It's configured in settings, of course, so it's already connected. We have single model, which is an ID field, of course, which is a primary key, but also a name, a car field. It's all about just showing an example. Everyone, of course, knows that more fields can be added. It's not vital at this point. Then we also added this to admin panel, so we can create new models. This time we'll be able to do it from our front end, but we wanted to see some results. Of course, administration model added. And then important things are we created a type, a graphene type, so a GraphQL type, out of this model. All of the fields, just one or two, including primary key, and a connection which then allowed us to list those. So create a query with a resolver. So all of this is Django graphing. Get the audio a bit louder. I can try, or I can speak louder, but I know that I always forgot to do it. I can see that my mic is on 100%, so anything that I do is probably just going to add a lot of noise. Not seeing any possibility to do more here. I'll try to speak louder. And zoom in. I can do something like this, which is enter presentation mode, which should give you a much larger view. Is it better? Cool. Okay. I figured you'd need something like this, so it's okay. Anyway, what we're going to do next is I'll show you how to do mutations. I would say mutation is SaaS Boilerplate, but in the end, those are mutations in Django graphing. So we don't add much in terms of something custom. No, I'm using PyCharm. PyCharm also to debug this. Since in PyCharm I'm also able to create a remote interpreter quite easily, so the functionality to debug Docker, as anything that runs in Docker is kind of built in. Remote interpreters here. So I can see there's another question. Maybe we'll go through through this after the session as well. Okay. How to configure this, and I recommend using PyCharm. Really, it's not just thinking it's better than VS Code or anything. I'm personally used to it since forever, and I know that everything you're able to do in here. If you guys need help, then that's what I can help with VS Code. I can't. Cool. So going back to our mutation, first thing that we would need to do is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Django REST framework, but that's also something that that we decided to use to work with Django graphing, and graphing whatsoever in here. Django graphing also comes in with mutations, or at least something that is able to generate mutations out of serializers. So this isn't like our own concept. It's something that already existed, that we built a little bit upon it to add a better connection between frontend and backend to serialize error messages from serializers a little bit better and make it reusable, and let's say on the front end also there's an implementation that understands the return errors and is able to populate form fields or errors associated with form fields automatically. So that's the biggest of the only change that we added. But anyway, first we need serializers. Serializer, you can think of it, if you're not familiar with Django REST framework, as a layer between the view and the model, so the database. It kind of pulls in data from database and changes this into an understandable or desired output, right? So if you have a field in backend, you want to either select a list of fields from the model or change how those fields are represented when rendered to or sent to backend. That's kind of what serializer is supposed to do. Of course, it's supposed to do more things than that, but that don't say is the gist of it. In the name is also there, serializing and deserializing. So serializing data into a format that is understandable by the front end. Sorry. So I created a file serializes.py. We're going to need one serializer, and I'm going to copy imports. It's a bit quicker, but we'll need two things. Since we're using the hash ID fields, I explained a little bit how those hash ID fields in the last session. If you didn't have chance to see it, then I recommend you that after our live coding session, you go and check out the hash ID idea, the algorithm behind it. But in the end, it's just something to obfuscate the numeric value of the ID in database. It's still numeric. It's still the same primary key. It's just that when it's sent to frontend, it's an obfuscated string. And yeah, let's write our serializer. So class, workshops item, since that's how I named the model. So workshop item serializer. Sorry, it's difficult to speak and write. Anyways, serializers, model serializer. And we're going to serialize two fields really, so both of them, all that we want. And for serializing the ID field, which is represented as a hash ID field, there is a more kind of built-in serializer field, which is hash ID serializer car field, and there's an error, and you just specify a source field. So that's a source field for our model, right? So this workshop item and .id, that's our primary key. It's a read-only, of course. We don't want anyone to change our ID, and then name, which is car field, and we're gonna set up a minimum length just for the sake of it, to see an error returned from backend. And in meta, you define which model it's connected to, which model it represents. It's workshop item, of course, and we want those both fields to be available. If we don't name those fields, then we will not get them returned. Sorry. And this should be enough for a serializer to work. You can see it's a very simple serializer. Two fields, and which are just one validation. Serializers can be very complex. They are meant to, one, return data to frontend, but two, also accept data that is coming from frontend to backend. Because what I said is serialized, but also deserialized. So in here, what this is going to represent is, think of this as a logic of the form. It accepts really one field, which is name, and it's going to create an instance of this model and save it to database. It's also able to update the model if we provide an ID, and save the but we're only going to go into creating this session. Okay, so since we have a serializer, let's go to our schema and let's connect and create a mutation which is going to utilize this serializer as a logic to save data into database. And the way you do it is quite straightforward, and we prepared or included in SaaS Boilerplate a helper class which allows you to use this serializer and not write too much code really. If you just want to create an instance, return the instance created, and serializer is a logic behind it. So that's how we do it. Is just create a class workshop item, create mutations, create model mutations. Sorry, I need to import the mutations. And the mutations are imported from our common GraphQL module. You can see it exists. And it takes a couple of meta parameters, meta arguments, which is first what model it represents also, because it's going to be needed to return the instance from the created instance, a new one. In this case, also decided to use an interface of relay. It's not necessary, but you can use it. And want all fields to be also returned from available as in the schema. And that created a mutation, but that's not all, because as similarly, I explained this in the first session, but similarly to what you get. Sorry, there's a question. If I make a mistake by adding a wrong column to a table, I want to change it, I still. Not sure again. I mean, anything that is Django related stays the same. We don't ship any custom Django or anything. It's, you know, if you change the name of a column, then what you do is create a migration. And in this case, the migration should just alter the table and change the name. And no additional work required, or not anything custom to happen here. What later you need to do is update the name of the column in the serializer. We'll generate the GraphQL schema, as we'll show in a moment, and I would say that's it, of course. And then changing names also induces some requirement to change in frontend, but from the Django side, it's the same. Yeah. The alter table is going to be generated automatically by Django migrations, right? So, there's migration here. This one is automatically generated, but you can imagine that the next one would be alter table with the same name and just fields which name you changed to which one. Okay, so I created a mutation, and what I wanted to say is that this is just a mutation that lives outside our GraphQL schema. So same as you have in Django URLs py, and you need to attach your views to specific endpoints, the same way or very similar thing that we need to do here. Since we create a mutation, we also would like to to gather multiple mutations. We create a mutation. We can think of this like a view set or something similar. It's just object type. Any object type can be composed into another object type, combined into one. So we create an object type in GraphQL, which is going to contain or keep this mutation. You'll see in a moment why exactly. So workshop item create mutation and create a field out of it. No, this can be a little bit overwhelming, but it just wait a second. I see that in config schema is like a primary or an entry part to our schema. You can think of this as the the URLs py, the top one for the whole Django application, the whole Django app. So going in here, you can see way more of those mutation objects similar to the one we just created in here. And when we import this one, and the import is in here, we can add this mutation object to the whole tree, the whole list of all of the mutations. So when we go to like demo schema mutation, you see there are more mutations in here and more in here. And in the end, it's just a way to split this into multiple files. You could take all of these mutations and list them here as a normal Python list one by one. But I don't believe that's it's a good solution. Always good to split things into multiple files, into groups, divided by the behavior, by the logic, what they do. So in this case, you can think of this object type, of this mutation object type, just as a way to split this into multiple files. In the end, what you see in here, this GraphQL mutation function, it just connects them together into one big class, right? So you could have next mutation here, another one, and that's what happens here. We already had our queries connected. So queries from previous session, the same thing, right? Okay, that should be enough for our mutation to be present, and actually that is enough for this mutation to create the instance of our model. I'd say quite easy to do. This custom mutation-based class takes care of that, but don't think about it like there's too much magic. Most of it is the copy from Graphene Django, just added some small changes to serialize errors in a different manner. So if you happy with using what Django Graphene gives you, there's also a serializer mutation, where you can also create serialization in there. So I'm wondering whether I have, sorry, I created, just now I'm talking about serializer, and I know that those arguments that I pasted in here were wrong. They should be serializer class, since we created serializer, right? So let's import this. Again, workshop item create mutation. It should receive serializer class. And it's going to pick up model on its own from inside this serializer. This is the one that we wrote a couple of minutes before. Sorry about that. Yes, thinking and writing and talking is difficult at the same time. So that's all that needs to happen for you to get an endpoint, this mutation that creates a model inside database. Not much to do, right? Okay, so now maybe let's see whether it needs to be, or it runs, because I could have done some another mistake to, or you can see that what password I set for my account in this instance. Yes, Nikolai, from global ILD exactly is how you're supposed to decode the, but it's different because it's not about hash IDs. The from global ID helper function from, well, okay, I think you figured it out. Because there are two things happening. The IDs that are created and sent through GraphQL are even further it's not really obfuscated, but joined together with the name of the model and turned into base 64 so that they are uniquely identifying the object throughout the whole client app. And additionally, on top of that, the ID is not just 1, 2, 3, 4, is a string that is just coded using some algorithm that is stable, which means that for each number you're going to get a hash that is predictable. It's just and it's always going to be unique. Yeah, exactly. It's only the second part. Oh. And it's very well written on the HashID website because it's a bigger algorithm than just Python or Django. It's used quite a lot in various different languages and frameworks. We use it for multiple number of years, and just works right, very similar to use in Django, and a good practice anyway. Okay, I wanted to see whether our backend is, or the backend I draw, the backend part is fine. So let me maybe restart backend. And also, you guys are thinking about ways to debug it, to see how whether there are some errors, and so there are two ways. More ways really, but two primary ones to check logs. Again, Docker compose logs backend. That's one way to do it. Oh, you see that there is some error. Serializer class required error. Serializer class. Did I make some mistake? What did I do wrong? Import signals? Is that live coding always goes like this? GraphQL mutation error. Don't know what's going on. There's probably some typo I made as usual. Does anyone see anything obvious? I want us this to stop us too long. Workshops, it's okay. I also don't see any typos, but still GraphQL mutation error. No, okay, something different. No, maybe it was a log before. So okay, it's probably like this. So when I was writing, the server has restarted probably when I wasn't finished. So you remember I forgot to add the serializer class and just checked out logs before actually restarting. So that was the case. Okay. So of course Docker compose logs backend. A build like -f can show you continuous logs to avoid what I just seen. There is also another way to use Docker desktop and then just find a container and check there. It's probably easier because then you can observe multiple containers at the same time. So I suggest you to do it like this, but of course this is just console logs, right? So later on I'll show you how to configure a debugger, a remote interpreter debugger here in PyCharm. It's quite easy to do, really. It's a couple of minutes. Okay, so seems like it started. What would be good next is to go to Frontend side. So maybe let's close backend part, and first thing to do to see whether our GraphQL schema is fine is to maybe regenerate the schema. If I remember the command right, generate schema, download schema, right? Sorry, I'm just thinking whether I created a CLI for it yet or not, but something like this is okay as well. So it's just, I had a month of break, so I forgot which CLI command already created or not. But looks like generated the schema successfully. Let me see if it created a mutation, and it looks like it did. Here is the create workshop mutation, and our item type, name, ID, everything is there. It's what we wanted, right? And download schema, both downloads schema and runs generate types as well. Also generate types is run in watch mode when you start Frontend. So you can also restart to see this. PNPM SaaS web up. Sorry. And also regenerated the types. And the types should be regenerated in a watch mode. Okay. So confirm that this has been generated, and also the types, same thing. GraphQL TS, those are our types. So a root would be a good idea to start with, I believe. So maybe let's create like a workshop items or item create. Sorry, I did feel very imaginative today to name things. Let's name component. First, the name of the file is up to you. It's our preferred way of naming things. There is no good way to do it. The way that works for you is usually ideal. Let's do a barrel export for everything in here. No, we didn't create anything yet, but we'll do it anyway in a moment. I will not be creating some additional components like to wrap this. Of course, in real life scenario, you have better structure in here. You probably have a separate form component, or maybe multiple components that represent a form or the layout of the page. Of course, in here we just want to show the gist of it, so how queries, also how mutation is created on the front end, as well as how it's sent to backend. So I'm just sometimes looking at YouTube to see whether there are some questions from you or not. Just two screens. Okay, so workshops or workshop item create component is going to be a functional component. I like to use this interface to. Sorry, I don't know if I have everything installed. I hope I do. React. No, it's here. Okay. Const workshop item create. So I have this one. Let's maybe oh, I know what's up. I named the file TS instead of TS6. Fine. Okay. So is a component. Nothing in here yet. It's a good idea to connect it to our main component, to our router. Just a quick recap. We have this way of creating asynchronous components for lazy loading. So not all of the routes are always loaded and initialized. So I'm going to create another asynchronous component, as we call it. So workshop item create, maybe being super imaginative again. And oh, sorry, I think they need to be, now the barrel export, but the default one. So this one as default. Makes sense. Always forget something. Okay, and then in our router, what we need to do is to add this route. So workshop item create and import it first. Really would be a better idea. and it's here. Okay, seems like this is it. I think I'm going to maybe render a div with the word create and see in browser whether it exists or not. I'm just trying to locate my browser. Oh, here it is. So there's this create. No workshops. Oh, right. I did a mistake. Let me show you that I talked to you that we're connecting this to router, but I forgot about the path. So it's the same path. So here inside there's this helper function nested path which creates nested routes, and I already prepared one before in the previous session. So we have this create, and now it should be better. So you should be able to see my browser and create, yeah. So our component works. Let's now create again, create a form which then is going to submit this data that we want to create a new item. So a very first thing probably that comes to mind is to create a form, and for now it doesn't have anything in there. This form is going to need an input. There is an input, a base input component implemented with Radix. So I will need to import this. Just thinking about its location. Oh, here it is. Web app core forms. So all such base components live inside the web app core module, and it comes in with, it's using Radix and Tailwind style, so it looks a little bit better, as well as it's implemented with various features already built in, accessibility and so on. Always good to use some ready design system than building on ONS. But then again, it's just an input. Doesn't hold any particular logic, maybe besides that it is able to render error messages on its own. But okay, what's of course obvious is that it's just an input. It doesn't do anything yet. So we need to create a logic, so a form logic to connect to events. So whenever someone changes, it's of course saved in state, errors are tracked, and maybe whether the form is submitted and so on. What we do is in SaaS Boilerplate we use React hook form, but additionally, as you remember, some time ago I said that on backend we added a couple of additional features, like serializing errors. So also on frontend we created a custom hook which is able to understand this returned format of errors and automatically, or at least give you helpers to populate those errors in React hook form. So instead of using use form hook, we have use API form helper or hook, which lives in web app API client, and you can think of it as the same thing as form. It returns the same thing in check this out, like const form. What am I doing? And inside this is the same. You see, it's opening the React hook form, right? Use form return. So those are the types that coming from React hook form, and everything is inside there is a default behavior, the default forms, everything from React hook form. So what I also want to have is some types. because hook form is also ready for TypeScript, and I would like to define types for our form. So let me create, just copy the name of this file, so it's going to be a little bit quicker, types. And those types are just field types. So workshops, item, fields, and name, right? The only thing we want is name. And maybe export this. Would be a good idea to have. And I'll copy name. It's automatically imported from our types. And what we get next, it can define like default values. And it's going to the type safe and suggest me name. Right, so I want an empty value as a default value for this name. You can imagine that it was formed to edit something. That's where you would put the default value pulled from backend for those queries. Now we have the form and our logic available to connect to the field. And the way you do it in React Hook form is use the form register function. So name. If I type something else that is not in this type, is going to, of course, throw me a TypeScript error that only a name field exists and the ASDF doesn't exist. A very neat thing. That's also why I like React Hook form for. I know other libraries can do similar things, of course, but it's better than I'm rather comparing it to not using a library at all. Okay, and what we need next is an onSubmit. And onSubmit also comes from React Hook form. So there is handle submit, and handle submit is receiving a submit handler, so a function which is going to be living in this component to actually commit the mutation, right? Because it's only going to send us data collected from Frontend. We need also to send something to backend. So const on submit is an asynchronous function with form data of this type, of those fields. Right? We can console log this to prove that the data, to validate that the data is incoming. And let's see our absolutely beautiful form. I'm thinking whether we need a button, but I don't think the field validation is in the form register. Both. You are able to use the serializer validation for sure. I'm going to try to present that, but also what I think is a good UX is doing those validations, if possible, on frontend. It's quicker, and why use backend resources, spinning up new requests, CPU, and so on, if you can just show the user error immediately, if it's something like minimum length or something. But generally, continuing this topic of front-end or client-side validation, that also never removes a need from backend-side validation, I think you're aware. But the other thing is that what I like to use, or we like to use adaptation to validate, is using YUP or YEP. It's a library that gives you a lot of freedom in terms of validation. You just define a validation schema, and then in here you use resolver that is also built in React Hook form. You go like YUP resolver in here. It's imported from inside the React Hook form, and here is where you go with YUP object and so on. So yeah. Works quite nicely. Okay, let's see whether this works. I wanted to show you my browser, and show you whether it works on, and also see myself whether what we wrote works or not. ASDF, my favorite one. As you can see, the console log work with form data is actually ASDF, or at least name is what we added in our input. Wasn't very difficult, but the fun part is actually sending this to database or to backend and save it to database. But just what Nikolai is writing, that makes sense, and you're hoping some GraphQL magic. I'd be afraid of too much magic, really. I don't think GraphQL, well, probably some custom annotations, but GraphQL doesn't carry over information about the limits, or I mean like validations. And validations can also be very custom, right? But what I mean is that it is possible. So I mean, when we'll send this value to backend, we will receive an error, and the error returned from backend should also or will also be visible beneath our input. That's what I meant by the custom create mutation base class. But also that's going to be like in a moment. Anyway, we have a form, we don't have any mutations, and the mutation is quite straightforward to create. It's very similar to what we created here in a workshop list. So the query, also let's do it. You can also create those queries in a separate files. Also what we like to do, create like workshop item create.graphql file. It also is easier to import. You can also create a separate module in here, which would be like workshops, and export those queries from there. That's also good for reusability. It's in the end up to you. We don't enforce many of such things. Okay, so export const, and that would be workshop or workshop item create mutation, GQL, and the magic comment, which well, let me import this first from, and the magic comment which adds you know, the IntelliSense syntax check for PyCharm is GraphQL, and literal. Okay, so what we have in here is mutation, and you can see that it starts highlighting, the proper highlighting. If I remove this comment, it just doesn't highlight. So that's what it does. And workshop item create mutation input. I believe it's the same name. Oh yeah, it gives us a suggestion. I think it's required, so the exclamation mark, and then create. I think I named it create workshop. Yeah. Input, and now define an output. So what we want to receive: workshop item, ID, and name. Give us all you have, and that is a mutation. And next, similarly to use API, we also have well, use mutation, but use mutation comes in directly from Apollo, so nothing custom here. It's like maybe a second. Use mutation and workshop create item mutation. The first object, first element in the returned array is our commit function. So that's basically what's sending a request to backend. Why do we have this? Did I? I wonder why it probably needs to regenerate, and that's all. Should work. Oh yeah, exactly. Just needed to save the file. Okay, so now in the on submit, that's what we can do is await commit. Let me see if you guys wrote something. No. Commit workshop item create mutation. Variables. All of this is Apollo, right? Input our name and form data name. So we provided all of the fields. So as you can see, also this input is on typesafe is checking whether all of the properties required by our mutation. So this input are provided. Neat thing. That's why I like working with TypeScript and GraphQL so much, because the types are auto generated, and you can always see if there are some missing things in requests. Also, what we get in here as a response is errors, right? So, but I'm not sure if no, we will need it, right? And there's also onError function, and onError function is probably this one is not really. It's being called, of course, when error is returned from our endpoint or our mutation. So there are two ways really to receive an error. There's a generic error, let's say 500, so something seriously doesn't work in backend. So this one should be called. But when the mutation just returns error field in the data, that's where it's going to go through here. And I think that in this case, what we would like to do is from this use API form, there is also a thing which is called set Apollo GraphQL response errors. And in here, we can pass those errors. Sorry, error GraphQL errors. And this will, because it comes in from the use API form, it will populate the errors returned from backend, unless we made some mistake. But of course, that's to be seen in a moment. We can also maybe pull in those errors from here, right? Because they I think they should be either errors here or in form, I think. Oh, sorry, yeah, they are in form. So let's just maybe console log. No. Let me find where the errors actually live, because no, it's form state, right? Sorry, guys. Lay down. It's here. That should be enough. So let me show you my browser. We refresh to be sure. We're seeing errors, but of course it's just a render. Maybe some new item number 1. Did we get some errors? Nope. What about here? Oh, seems like it created actually the new item number 1. Now I remember we put like a minimum 10, so maybe when I send here, I should be able to receive some errors. And as you can see, errors are there in a field name, and there is message returned from backend. So let's see what happens if we pass this into an input field. So form state errors, and is also type checked, so name, but I believe we need to do nullish class in each one. message, for example, right? Just show it. Oh, errors or error. Ensure this field has at least 10 characters, and this error comes in from backend. This is the same thing what you were asking about. So if you feel lazy enough and don't want to do client validation and you want to use the backend one, then sure, go ahead. The plus in using client-side validation is also it's easier to translate because you can return error codes instead of error messages, and this way you should be able to show messages translated through React INTL, which also is configured in SaaS Boilerplate, right? And that's what we usually do. Add custom codes returned together with those messages and translate them. So that looks like all from the part of creating mutations, showing a validation error, and should allow you to get started. Of course, all of this can get much more complex and difficult. And if you're interested in how to do something more complex, then the best way to see how this is done is to go to the crude demo module, which is inside SaaS Boilerplate, and it presents a full create, retrieve, update, and delete scenario. So not only you're able to see the same things as I showed you a minute ago, which is like commit mutation, but also how to update the data that is in local store with thing that has been returned from backend. Just trying to find an example for you. Not sure if it's in here or not, but it should be somewhere. Oh, and here is also an example of how to do a validation without Yup. We didn't want to enforce too much on you, so using the default one inside React hook form, but this is easily changeable to Yup schema. Just trying to locate the updater. Maybe I'm just thinking whether it's there. Oh, I think it's here. Yeah. So delete mutation. For example, if you wanted to send a mutation to delete something, then so you don't have to refetch queries and waste some precious server time, then you can delete it on your own from local Apollo store like this. Just modifying the cache. Read more about this in Apollo documentation, because again, all of this is regular Apollo. Now, just trying to kind of forcefully point out that SaaS Boilerplate is more like configured tools put together as a package, not customization or some custom framework that does things differently on its own for some reason. It's more like opinionated set of tools. Okay, I think that's all from what I wanted to cover in terms of catching up with the first session. I think that I will need to record the first session because I know that there are some issues with quality of the recording. So you guys, if you haven't been able to participate in the first session, you'll be able to catch up. We still have some 25 minutes, which is a good thing, because I know you guys wanted to talk, or you wanted to talk about some workers. So I think it's a good time for you to ask right away. Okay, so start with the first one. Why serverless over Celery? The answer, the obvious answer is to avoid even complicating the stack even further, and any type of work with infrastructure when you need to create additional workers, manage the number of workers, automatic scaling, and so on is an additional layer that a lot of people have trouble overcoming. But so that's why it's not by default in SaaS Boilerplate. But I can tell you that a lot of projects that we built using SaaS Boilerplate also have celery configured as a second one. So we treat those serverless as a smaller way of or a quicker way of doing some smaller task. But whenever something bigger comes up, some recalculations, some data materializations on anything, anything that will run longer than 15 minutes ends up on celery. And if you follow the configuration infrastructure of backend, then it's quite easy to set up celery. Also recently we're thinking that maybe it is a good idea to include those celery workers, because there are a lot of workarounds that we need to do in order to have those serverless functions. I mean, the question is very valid, and what I wanted to say is nothing stops you, of course, to add celery, and it shouldn't be that difficult because it's pretty much the same thing as backend. It should be using the same image. Celery plays very nicely with Django, so also you wouldn't have to configure too much. Just add typical celery configuration files, and two services, one service, and just copy paste what is there for backend server for ECS. And the second service probably for if you need it for the celery bit, right? So it only runs once. I think I can assist you in that because I did it a couple of times already. On Lambda, yes, you can install any dependencies. The problem with Django on Amazon Lambda is that Django is a WSGI application, which Lambda is not ready or meant to do. There are projects on GitHub which allow you to do it, but also it comes with drawbacks. The startup time of whole WSGI application for each run of Lambda function is just, it increases the code time starts and kind of kills the whole idea of using serverless. So they don't have a great adoption. We also went through this a little bit, but if you see that SQL Alchemy is a like a problematic thing for you, but which we always treated serverless functions like those to do some smaller things, so we don't re-implement all of the models, but only some of them, part of them really only read-only often. So also probably go the celery way if you need more control, say more complex scenarios, and yeah. So if you know celery and you wouldn't have that much trouble to configure a copy of Backend, but just with different command. Instead, like manage by run server, you run celery workers. Then I recommend doing that because well, we know you know yourself with all of the goodies that celery plus Django comes in. Sure. There's also another question. For the backend, if you want to limit access to GraphQL API based on roles, where do you make those changes? Okay. Let me try to find this to you on an example best instead of writing this. Schema, whether it is here or not, or probably it's going to be in users because that's often what it's. Okay, So if you're familiar with Django overall, then this is going to feel familiar as well. We added those wrappers that you can add to any type of object type or even resolver, and they work pretty much the same. So you have permission classes and policies. This one is in anyone full access. Also, there should be more of them somewhere in here. But the idea is that is authenticated, is anonymous, use full access and so on, admin full access, and they are. What we used is res access policy library, and those policies are very similar to how IAM works. And I would say it's up to you whether you like IAM or not. But in the end, they were like, this group has an ability to call this action, to, this, you can kind of find control that maybe this group is not allowed to call this action, or maybe only one is allowed, and so on. You can deny by default and then keep adding, but in the end, here's how you use those permission classes based on groups. And also, if you're adding some custom roles, like roles-based access control inside your code, and of course anything that goes into resolvers, similar to how you probably would do it in Django, so returning nulls, throwing freeze, and so on. So some more custom. Does it make sense? Holistic outlook. Awesome. Do you guys have other questions, maybe? And someone again asked the Docker, but I think they left. I'm not sure. Was it one of you guys? Usually I don't have enough time to do one-to-one sessions. But if you write on Discord your particular problem, and I would be able to answer, then maybe we'll be able to do a one-to-one session. So just describe what you for the next 15 minutes so we can use it. But yeah, the best would be to start a topic on Discord, and I guess sure, if I won't be able to write what you and help you with this, then call is going to be quicker on Discord, because well, that's what Discord is also for. So just turn on the voice and start talking. So of course, don't have problem with that. Okay. So again, was it one of you who wanted to talk about the? Oh, let me just show it. Maybe someone who watches the video will be able to take something out of it. I know that the guy wrote that he knows how to do it already, but yeah, debugging the backend. So in PyCharm. Yeah, Docker debugging in PyCharm. That's what I meant. So quick tutorial. Open SaaS Boilerplate. Then again, when you have this project open, this is quite important, I would say, is open again, but this time open, navigate of course there, and open the backend directory. And when the pop-up shows up, sorry, losing voice. Pop-up shows up, click attach, and you can see that this backend directory is in bold. That means that is also open like a second project inside this project and attached. So I still see a single screen, but have two projects open. What does it mean? Is that when I open settings, I can see this as a separate module. And in project interpreter, interpreters. Oh, here. Project interpreters on the left, you can see all of the modules. So there is this backend. So that's what's important, that I will be setting an interpreter for this project. So whenever I run something inside the backend, I'm sorry. You don't see another win. Oh, that's interesting. Give me a second and try to find this, because I'm sharing a window. It looks like PyCharm settings opened up in a different window. You should be able to see it now. Let me backtrack. Okay. Okay, so again, I opened settings, so regular settings in PyCharm. Navigate to interpreters, Python interpreters, and then on the left there are two modules. One which is the project itself, and the second is this backend that we just attached. And on the right, you can add another interpreter. I don't think you're able to see, but when you click add an interpreter, it's a combo box. And then you press Docker Compose. And I'm thinking that well, you know what? Give me a second, I'll share the whole screen, because I can see that in PyCharm everything opens up in a different window, and you guys cannot see anything. Just hope I don't overshare, but tell me if you guys can see this again. I think you do. Start a bit when you launch it first. Okay. You mean from the beginning? Okay. In PyCharm, when you sorry, getting lost. So file open, then in the files navigate to backend directory, the one inside the project. You get this backend, to press attach, then settings. Then in here you select Python interpreter. There is a search option in here, so just type in interpreter. Then you have two modules there. When you open this one, select backend, go into add interpreter. On the right, Docker Compose, and here you will be able to see the configuration for our remote interpreter. In terms of SaaS Boilerplate, we have multiple configuration files. So there's Docker Compose, but there's also Docker Compose local. Please select it. It's necessary for volumes to work. Then backend, right? Project name is not important. Variables should be pulled in from .env file, and just press next. It'll try to pull data from inside the Docker container to see whether it was able to start it and find all of the packages. Seems like it worked. Discovered Python interpreter inside Docker. So this one, it says user local bin, but that's a path inside the Docker container, and I just created 3.11.6 is also the version of Docker of Python inside the Docker container, and I can close it with OK. So that was like part one. Part two, and I need to exit. I think need to exit the presentation mode for a moment. Is here on top, you have configurations, and sorry, lost my screen. Okay, here are configurations. So press edit configuration, and here on the left, plus Django server. You can also search here, just type, like Django, and you'll see Django server. Name it however you want. Host needs to be 0000, so it's available outside. Port, our port is 5001. What we'll be needing in here is to select the project, the backend, the one that we opened before. This makes sure that all of the working directories are fine. And that, from my side, it's pretty much done. It's one last step required, but probably in your case, there's also going to be a button, enable Django settings, with an exclamation mark there, which you just press and then fill out the data. Maybe I'm going to try to search it for you. So I'll apply this and close for now. We'll get back to this ASDF. So settings and Django. Probably, yeah. Django, when you see, again, there is backend, enable Django support. And Django project root, this backend, it should be auto-filled. In settings, if it's empty, then just fill in config settings spy. It's this directory in backend config settings spy. It's Django settings, most important file in the whole Django, I'd say. And this one should be automatic. And that should be enough for you to turn on Django support. When you're done with this, let's go back to edit configurations. And one last step is we need to add environmental variable. Since PyCharm is overwriting Python path, we need the proper one. So let's override it. But to pick up the value, take it from Docker file. Also backend Docker file. Here you see, we want this Python path. Copy this. Open the configuration, our ASDF, in your case probably run backend or something like this. And here, Python path. Type this value. It allows it to find the libraries we installed in Docker. Because we're using PDM, it stores in this directory. Okay. And it should be enough to be able to run, at least for now, run the backend. All right. I need to close my current Docker 2. Oh, so maybe let's do SaaS down, close everything. My port was taken because I'm already running backend. So stop that. And when it's done, here on top, or in my case it's Shift M10, you should be able to start this by, run server. And that's just running, but next to it is a button for debugging, so I can see it works. So I can stop it and run the debug part. It starts a debugger session inside Docker. It starts a server here in PyCharm and connects one to the other. And as you can see, again, I have a started development server at the same port as SaaS Backend app does, but also with a debugger attached. So now if I go, let's say to, I don't know, maybe let's use our serializer that we created. I'm interested if it's going to work. Should, of course. No, because we don't have any function anywhere in here. So I remember there is a user mutation or user query that is current user, and I remember that you can easily stop it there. Yeah, so resolve current user, just to show you that it works. I'm going to open the browser and just refresh the page, and yeah, PyCharm stopped the session of the request to this query, this current user query. In here I can browse all of the fields, all of the context, which just proves that debugger is attached, code is mapped properly, and you can now travel further back and so on, as you'd normally do in debugging. Oh, appreciate that you like it. As you can see, it's not that difficult to do. I mean, probably when you're looking at PyCharm or anything like this, configuring such remote debugging IDE might seem difficult. But when you understand and start understanding the parts of it, then just makes sense, right? Because in the end, what we did is created an interpreter, and usually what you do in your local machine is you install interpreter, right? You go and install Python, and whether from web or from terminal, that's what you do. You create an interpreter. Or when you install PyCharm, you get an interpreter built in. An interpreter, well, of course, is something that interprets your Python code, runs it, right? So we switch it from the local host to the one created on Docker, right? So our PyCharm, to run the script, isn't going to use the Python installed on your system. It's just going to, well, kind of log into the container and run your code there. The second thing it's going to do is to create a debugger server there. Debugger server is something that gets the interruptions, the CPU interruptions, and sends them to IDE to just say, I'm stopped here. Show to the user that this code has stopped at this line. And in the end, that's what's happening. So here, when we configure this correct configuration, it's also what you would do if you are just developing a Django application. So when you wanted to start the server, so you don't type this into terminal, you also would configure it something like this. But instead of Python interpreter, you would be using the default one. It's just this, that we selected, okay, but still, I don't want to run this on my machine. I want to run this inside container. And the last part is my libraries are in this directory. And that's all we did. So it all plays nice together, and that's just one way of debugging things in Docker that I like the most, because I love PyCharm and find it easy to navigate. I know that there's a lot of people that just like doing it natively with PyDebugger. Yeah, so current working status of SaaS Boilerplate. We keep getting feedback from you guys with things that you encounter when something doesn't work, and try to work with it. We're also going to do more investments in next year in SaaS Boilerplate. So trying to add more features. For sure, it's a living thing and work in progress. We are using this internally in our projects as well, so that means that it's quite important to us. Of course, in our case is that when we encounter problems like this, they're easily fixable or quickly fixable by someone internally. In terms of open source, it just needs to go through a couple of more steps, so that's why it's a little longer. What the latest PR should be better to wait for more fixes. I guess it should be workable, but every bug that you guys encounter is also usually well, I would say surprise, but something that wasn't supposed to be there. It's difficult to say how stable something complex like this can be, right? Because it's so many different libraries constantly coming out new ones and want to be updated to the latest version. So there's a question whether we want to have those latest version of the libraries or try to work on the stability of current one, but it's a constant battle between one and the other. But in the end, it's very difficult to answer. For sure, trying to help on Discord channel to try to figure out the most obvious ones. I think that we did tackle most of the obvious ones yes, already, but yeah, difficult to say how, if something like this can be super stable in the future. Maybe we missed that we had editing permissions, so that might be a problem, and why Michał decided to create a new one. I remember him talking about this. It's just there were lots of changes that he needed to introduce, and I don't think he knew he was able to directly edit. That's why he created another one. So that might just be a miscommunication issue. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't think I have any guide for you to contribute better. This one, I think it was like a miscommunication, but no, just trying to do anything is already helping. So, you know, you just doing the PR already helped a lot. Okay, we need to wrap up anyway. So thank you for attending, for your questions. Thank you for your contributions, and I hope to hear you next time. Bye.